Afternoon, everyone. I know it's a Friday afternoon, and thank you for being here for this session. And I'm really excited about having this conversation with everyone. And one of the things is I would like you to do this as an interactive thing. So if you need to chat or ask a question, please post it on the chat box. As I was saying, I've not been doing a lot of the Zoom presentations, more on in-person work. So I'll have to get my skills up again. And thanks, Stacy and Michelle, for helping me with that. So I'm just going to share my screen first, and then we could start. Let me know if you are able to see my screen. It's good?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to move this here so that okay, there we go. I will begin with the land acknowledgement.
We can't see the slides anymore.
You can't see it? Okay.
No.
Not now? Okay, I'm going to stop the screen share. Sorry about that. Oops. Why is it doing that? I have to stop now.
Which screen do you have your Zoom launch, like your internet open on? That's the screen that's showing. If you move your PowerPoint over, I bet you it'll pop up.
Okay. Maybe that's what it was.
There you
I
go.
moved it from
There we
the
go.
other screen.
There you go.
Okay.
It was hiding.
It was hiding. Because what happened was I just moved it from the other screen and then it forgot it was there. Okay. That makes sense. I will begin with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on Treaty 4 territory with a presence in Treaty 6, the traditional territory of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, in the homeland of the Métis Nation, that we who are located on this land are beneficiaries of this treaty. We respect and honor the treaties that were made on all territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we are committed to moving forward in partnership with Indigenous nations in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Can you see my other slides just before I proceed further? Can someone tell me if it's showing the sidebar too?
Yes, it is.
Okay, it is. Then I'll just make it. Is that now good?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you to the Office of Research Services and Office of Research Partnerships for giving me this opportunity to join you for this session. My name is Sujatha Ross, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm a racialized woman, and I'm 5'6" with below the shoulder wavy black hair. I usually like to do a visual description of myself to be more inclusive. I'm brown skinned and wear glasses. And today I'm wearing a coat which is checked with a cream top. And I'm the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Advisor at the University of Regina. My academic background, as some of you who have met me know, I have a PhD in social psychology. And my thesis was on how race, culture, discrimination impacted on the identities of 4 groups of ethnic minority women, and they were particularly employed women. And the 4 groups I worked with were African, Chinese, Indian, and Pakistani groups. And I have lived also and worked in India, Edinburgh, Scotland, and Canada with diverse groups and communities. Although I do have an academic background, my passion is actually grassroots work. And I love working with individuals, engaging in conversations, and engaging with individuals on campus on how we could make our campus more welcoming, equitable. So this is my where I come from, and my grassroots work has been in different spaces, both in Edinburgh and in India, and more recently with the Regina Open Door Society for the last 9 years. One of the things I would like to ask you, if there are any, at any time, please do raise your hand. I can't see everybody, but if you put it in the chat box, then Michelle will be able to help me, or Stacy will be able to support me by saying there is a question coming up. Feel free to just talk, unmute yourself and talk and ask questions too. I will stop and we can have a conversation, because I feel it is not just me giving a presentation, but it is something that we need to interact, talk, and engage so that we learn together. So the conversation we are having today may be difficult at times. Feel free to opt out of parts of the session to take care of yourself. Please feel free to connect and talk with me if you want to engage and take our conversation further, and connect with health and wellness services on campus. Confidentiality and participation: share only what you feel comfortable sharing. We encourage each one to respect what is being shared and challenge the ideas when necessary and not the people. Feel free to share the learning that has happened with others. I always feel that whatever we talk, share, and engage in today, it can be shared with everyone. So please feel free to share it with the campus community, because we want all of us to engage in these conversations. So the session structure, I've put it down as, because the topic is building inclusive teams, I'm focusing more on the nature of the teams and why intercultural competency is important, looking at what culture means to us and what is cultural competency, what is cultural humility, intercultural competence, impacts when we do not have intercultural competence, or there is a breakdown, and then giving some recommendations or ideas as to how we could go ahead and build inclusive teams. So one of the things that I wanted all of us to think about is, when we think of teams, what do we think? We think of sports teams, which comes to our mind. We can think of a leadership team. We can think of a departmental team, hybrid teams, project teams, research teams, operational teams, sales, marketing, finance, legal teams. There are many teams which come to our mind as soon as we start thinking about teams. And each of these teams will have its own characteristics. It will have the ways of operating, and like who takes leadership, and how the team works together. So there are many things that make up the team. And to give an overall general definition of teams, teams are nothing but individuals who are committed to a common purpose, share a common goal. They are mutually accountable, interdependent, and required to cooperate and collaborate to accomplish tasks. Teamwork, as we all know, is valued across multiple disciplines. There has been a lot of research which has shown that teamwork is used in the military, healthcare, social work, business, education, sports, politics, you name it. Everywhere we do have collaboration and teamwork. It has also been shown that teams, working in teams, increase productivity. Research has shown that students, when they were given multiple choice questions to answer individually, they would get some of the answers not so correct, and their correct answers improved when they worked together as a team, when they worked collaboratively, and their performance improved. So we know that teams, if they work well, they can be really productive. However, we all bring preconceived ideas of how teams should be based on our personal experiences of being part of teams. And that I'm going to call or label them as cultural scripts. We bring cultural scripts of how a team should be from our family experiences, our experiences of being in a community, our schools, our friends, how we participated in sports teams, social media, the online communities we participate in. And the other thing that we need to be aware of is when we are looking at teams, all team members may not share an universal understanding of how a team should be. Because we come from diverse groups and diverse communities, all of us will bring our own understanding from our background, from our cultural scripts of how a team should act, how a team should function. And sometimes this is what will cause friction or misunderstandings or miscommunication. And so this leads into why we should build cultural competency, cultural humility, and intercultural competence. So why is intercultural competency important? We know our world is changing. Globally, we are becoming so diverse. There's a demographic shift. And then we also have issues around cross-cultural interactions. We have prejudice, we have discrimination. And we know, as we mentioned before, inclusive, interculturally competent teams can be really productive. And to go a little further, we know there is a shift in demographics from the statistics. This is from the census data of 2021. We know that 1 in 4 Canadians currently are born outside of Canada. 1 in 5 Canadians aged 15 and older have a disability. More recently, in 2022, data showed that 27% of Canadians aged 15 and older have at least one disability. 47.5% of employed individuals are women. 5% belong to the indigenous population. In a workplace, there are 5 generations. If we take our own university, we know we are a diverse community. We have more than 100 countries represented. We have 14.8% indigenous students, 25% or almost there international students, 1,600 active users of the University of Regina's accessibility services. And the total number of our university, the student community is almost 16 plus, which 1,000 and plus, which is about 17,000. And the total number of employees is more than 3,000. So we are a 20,000 strong community. And we have all this diversity. And so we really need to understand and build our intercultural competencies so that we can be inclusive and we can be welcoming. So let's go to the next question. What does culture mean to us? Culture can mean many things to us. As soon as we look at culture, we can think of food, we think of clothing, we think of language, our religion, arts, music, literature. We can think about many aspects. Dr. Bennett in 2021 in Canadian Settlement in Action, History and Future discusses the contextual nature of culture. And apart from the visible or the aspects of culture, which are very obvious, we also have other parts of culture which are not so obvious to us. And they can be our shared values, our beliefs, and our behaviors as groups of individuals. In my doctoral thesis, I found that participants in the study referred to community using three-part lists. Often they would use three-part lists to talk about shared ways of thinking, shared ways of relating, shared values, shared beliefs, and shared ways of looking at things. So this shows, and they would use the concept of community interchangeably with culture. So what we find is sharing values, beliefs, thinking, ways of thinking, looking at things, having something shared is what we talk about as culture. And so when we come from diverse communities, we bring our own personal understandings of what culture means to us. And Bennett uses three, I like this very much. She uses three images as analogies for culture. One, a fish in a fish bowl. And here the reference is to the water that the fish is living in. And what Bennett points out is that just like the fishes in the water, the influences of culture may not be always apparent to us. We may not always see that openly, or it may not be visible to us or brought to our awareness. The second Bennett suggests is the analogy of image of the eyeglasses. And Bennett says that we all wear our cultural lenses to interpret situations. What is happening maybe within our teams? What is happening in our communities? When we interact, we use our cultural lens to interpret situations. And the third image that Bennett talks about is onion rings. We all know you can peel off so many layers of an onion. And Bennett says that culture is like an onion where you can peel off, and it has many layers. As I said, we have the visible, we have the layers of culture which are not so visible. And then this is an important iceberg model of culture that Hall has given. And this is something that many of you may be familiar with, and you would have already seen. And versions of this have been talked about in workshops in different groups. So I'm just putting up a picture of my version of the iceberg. And this is a cultural iceberg where we can see like some of the visible things, like the color of my skin, that's easily visible, or food, or music, or art. These are some of the visible aspects of a culture. And there could be other aspects too, like race, age, physical abilities, gender, which are more visible when we look at it from the outside. Whereas there are other aspects like our religion, our spirituality, our marital status, our ethnic background, sexual orientation, our family roles, our health status, our hobbies, even our political affiliations, our socioeconomic status. These may not be really visible to us. And so culture has all these layers, many, many layers which we have to unpack. And so sometimes this becomes a daunting task for us when we think, how can I really then understand culture? How can I really be competent? How can I really interact with somebody else who is not similar to myself, who's different from me? And what mistakes could I make, or what errors could happen during communications? And so these are some of the questions, and sometimes we bring all these fears into our interactions, into teams. So let's see how we can build so that we can learn or grow together to become more interculturally competent. The first term that I want to share with everyone is cultural competency. Now, cultural competency refers to learning about another culture's language, customs, beliefs, and values. And by learning and reading and understanding, a lot of service providers, I have worked service providers here. I'm using those who are providing health services, social work services, education services. and other services to the community, use this knowledge to produce responsive services. An example that I can show is that a collaborative research project is initiated involving teams from a Western university and a university in an East Asian country. The lack of cultural competency in the initial stages leads to challenges in team dynamics and project execution. The Western team is more accustomed to direct, explicit communication and sends possibly emails with straightforward instructions. The East Asian team values indirect communication and more consensus building. Again, let me stop here. This is not just to say that there's only two ways of looking at things. Their culture is a continuum. And as I had said, globally things are changing, but this is an example to highlight what I mean by cultural competence. So the Eastern team finds the approach of the Western university very abrupt, but hesitates to voice concerns. The Western team expects quick decisions, while the Eastern team prefers a consultative, hierarchical approach. So to resolve the situation, both teams work with cultural facilitators to understand the cultural norms and to build their respective cultural competencies. Now, when we learn about other cultures, one of the challenges with this approach, or just learning what the language, the art or music, or how to behave in a culture, what we read, the theoretical knowledge we bring, oftentimes sometimes can allow us to make missteps or in our communication, because you cannot apply the knowledge as such to all groups who belong to the same cultural community or cultural group. And that is where it can become problematic. And so it has been suggested that you move further from cultural competence, just learning about the cultures, to another approach. And this was coined by Melanie Tervelon and Jan Murray Garcia in 1998. And they called this term cultural humility. And they used it primarily to address health disparities and institutional inequities in medicine. They found that in the nursing team, sometimes with this knowledge, mistakes could be made when they were giving patient care. Assumptions could be made based on the background knowledge that they had learned or understood. Assumption could be made on what the patient actually wants. And so they gave this approach where they said one needs to actually approach the individual and find out if this is what, whether the cultural understanding is correct, whether the cultural understanding is appropriate. And so it also allows space not just to see culture as monolithic, but also to emphasize intersectionality, where the person is coming with their different identities, and also an understanding of the individual's own personal biases and other implicit biases which could play into the interaction. So cultural humility, the aspects of it is a curiosity or willingness to learn more by interacting and learning about the cultural differences, and a realistic ongoing self-appraisal. So there is this back and forth movement here. There should be flexibility. And we also have to approach the whole learning with humility and courage, not knowing, okay, that we have learned some background information and applying it as it happens. And we are also then interested in the other person's experiences, and we are sensitive to the power imbalances that could exist. Now, Campbell, in an article, suggests that just saying, okay, cultural competence is not sufficient, or saying cultural humility is better, instead of doing that, Campbell suggests that we bring both of them together. We have some understanding of the cultural background, which is our cultural competence, and we do the interaction, we learn, we try and understand what is happening contextually in that particular group or in a particular team. And that knowledge helps us to move forward. So together, if we use both the cultural competence and cultural humility together, it will give us a better outcome. Cultural humility is accepting the knowledge or background information that we have and acknowledging that just the background information is not sufficient and going further to learn from the individuals themselves about their concerns and using it to explore further actions and how we could function. Now, the final thing that I wanted to share here is intercultural competence. Bennett 2014 refers to intercultural competence as the ability to interact effectively and appropriately across different cultures. So Bennett suggests three aspects of intercultural competence. One is the cognitive competence, that is self-awareness, awareness of our own cultural worldview, where I am coming from, how do I view certain issues, how do I view things that I see in my environment. So it is becoming aware of my personal cultural worldview. The second is affective competence, learning about the other culture. Both the outward aspects, as we said, in the iceberg, maybe language, culture, dance, art, music, looking at outward aspects, as well as going into the in-depth understanding of the cultures. So that is the second aspect of intercultural competence. And the third, the most important aspect is a behavioral competence or empathy, where we have the ability, we develop the ability to see the world from another's worldview. It is not just about stepping into someone's shoes. That is not what intercultural competence is. It is beginning to develop by engaging, by understanding, by learning. We begin to start seeing the world as how others see it. And that is when things begin to come together. We can develop an understanding of each other within a team. I just want to share this example. I thought it was a fun example that I saw online about how Coca-Cola made a cultural misstep. Now, the brand Coca-Cola took their product to China. Here, I'm not saying anything to offend or harm anyone, but it's just an example. They just took the brand and wanted to use the same name. And so what they did is they just took it to the company, took it and marketed in China using just the words Coca-Cola. And what happened is the characters that they used resulted in local product names, which the meaning of which was like bite the wax tadpole. So what happened is this was a cultural misstep. They did not want a drink which they were wanting to market and be attractive to individuals, sounding and having a meaning which did not make it marketable. And so they started doing some research. They sorted through 4,000 characters and identified 200 characters that pronounced the sounds the company needed. And the result, they identified the phonetic equivalent for Coca-Cola, and then the meaning also translated literally into happiness in the mouth or tasty fun. So this is just an example. It's a fun example, but it tells us how when we just take some of our cultural understanding and put it into a context, it can cause us to have a cultural misstep, or there can be a breakdown of communication or understanding. So some of the things that I wanted to share today is understanding culture and power difference. Now, this comes from a study by Greet Hofstede, and a lot of criticism has been made about these theories, but there are aspects of which are relevant for our conversation today. And so I thought I could share it today. And what I would say is that Hofstede actually looked at national identities and groups of countries and did a research and found out some cultures or communities were more collectivistic or we-oriented, as Hofstede suggested, and others were individualistic or I-oriented. And Hofstede gave some examples. In today's changing, we need to take this in the context of our global world, in our changing global culture, and use aspects of this which are meaningful for us. But some of the things which we could have, and this could become like building into our own cultural competency. Collectivist cultures are high in power distance. That means they will find there is a gap between the leadership and the individuals or persons, other participants in teams. Whereas in individualistic culture, the gap between the leadership and participants in the teams are usually not so, there is not a big distance between the two. And in collectivist cultures, there are clear leader roles. It's hierarchical. Whereas in an individualistic culture, more collaborative leadership. And team in collectivist cultures is viewed more as a broad entity, not so much focus on deliverables. It is seen more relational. And team in individualistic cultures is seen more as task-oriented with formal roles and deliverables. I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this and where some of the issues can arise when we are having some task to perform as a group or as a team. Sometimes in collectivist cultures, there is a lower concern with performance, and in individualistic cultures, there is a high concern with performance. Collectivist individuals or persons coming with the collectivist background may have difficulties voicing opinions or even challenging leaders. And this can be compounded by other aspects which build into it, like racism, prejudice, stereotyping, and inability to express themselves. Individualistic cultures, on the other hand, have privilege and may have less difficulty with voicing opinions and challenging leaders. In collectivist cultures, when teams come together, it was found that often, even after the teamwork was over, the cultural groups would go out and have dinners together or do family activities together. Which is not to say that it doesn't happen here. Yes, we do have coffee, we do relate, we go out and do things, even when we live in an individualistic culture. But this is just to say predominantly this could happen. And then, whereas in an individualistic culture, group members can view as the group membership as more task specific and as transitory, just for the period the work is happening. In high power distance cultures, or in more the collectivist cultures, the supervisor or a principal investigator could be seen as the deciding authority. And taking personal credit may not be acceptable. And usually praise and rewards are shared. And rules may be less important than relationships. And sometimes addressing an unexpected topic becomes important than even following an agenda. Cultures, on the other hand, who have implicit communication, In collectivist cultures, we also have ways of communication which are more implicit. Many cultures rely on nonverbal cues, gestures, and context. Silence can be often used as a way of expressing thoughts, and the collectivist members coming from collectivist cultures or backgrounds may avoid confrontation as harmony is valued, which is not to say it is not valued elsewhere. Uh, there may be an emphasis on politeness, and what constitutes politeness may vary. In low power distance cultures or the more individualistic cultures, we have more consultation and praise and rewards for individual achievements can be given. We could also, which could also minimize the contributions of others in the team or in the group. And rules become more important regardless of relationships and even the context. And taking up time to discuss things not listed in the agenda can oftentimes seem as inappropriate. And the cultures, individualistic cultures, usually have direct communication styles, express opinions and feedbacks directly, engage in direct confrontation when needed, do not value ambiguity, are very task-oriented, and make less space for emotions within teams. And we need to remember that when we were talking about individualistic and collectivist cultures, it is only an example. We have other identities which all come into play when we talk of intercultural competencies. We need to understand the intersectional identities which are brought into the team or into the group through religion, because of religion, gender identification, disability, our race, ethnicity. So there are many intersectional identities that individuals bring into a group or a teamwork. And we need to be aware. And that's where we need to first build our cultural competencies, have the cultural humility, and move towards building our own intercultural competence. And this will impact when we come with all these differences and understanding into a team, it will impact how each person or each group's approach learning and knowing, tasks and processes, how we approach conflict resolution, decision making, and even what is appropriate and inappropriate disclosures. And when there is a breakdown or when we do not have this intercultural competence, then what would happen is we can impose our views, our ideas on others. So some of the things that can happen is we can force sameness on others. We can tell individuals they are in this country, they should do things our way, not their way, or just not be part of this community. It can lead to stereotyping, and stereotyping can lead to exclusion of individuals. For example, individuals who value harmony and are non-confrontational can be not seen as leadership materials and may exclude team members from giving them leadership roles or giving the opportunities to take up leadership roles. It could cause social exclusion. Silence can be treated as incompetence and exclude individuals from collaboration in groups when there is discussion, when there's conversation. Individuals who do not voice their opinion immediately can be excluded. Or even when we do team building exercises, we can exclude persons with disabilities, those who come from religious or cultural groups. So what type of team building exercises do we offer? We need to be cognizant of that is also inclusive. Because in team building activities, when individuals go out to have a meal or get together to do an activity, it is where that informal networking happens, meeting people, making connections. And we need to be aware, are we excluding individuals who do not fall under the sameness that or similarity that we enjoy with others. And then there are feelings of unconscious biases. When we have different cultural groups within teams, we can begin to think that our ways of doing things are better. And then there is this superiority feeling. We are better than them. Or it can lead to inferiority. They are below us. Or we could make ethnic jokes, saying something that makes others laugh. Teasing and mockery. I can't understand when they speak, can't understand their accent. Listen to this, and mimicking the accent. Promoting hate and prejudice. We should get rid of these people. They are destroying our country. They are causing the social and financial problems. Building narratives, hate speech, or harassment. You sound Middle Eastern. We don't want a terrorist. Or bullying, you stink, showing actions of wrinkling nose. Or denial and access to opportunities. We can't hire people whose background is. Segregation. You should be using that facility. This one is reserved for us. Prevention or access to power. Let's not allow them to become our leader or make important decisions for us. Systemic discrimination as an unwritten code or policy. These people should not be considered for the new post. Let us keep it to people we know. So how do we move from all of this lack of understanding towards building inclusive teams? One of it, we have been hearing how we could build our own cultural competence and become interculturally competent. We can make an effort always to use inclusive language. I know that I make missteps in this area often, and but to be conscious, to always self-reflect, to be aware where we are coming from, and address our discriminations, our prejudices, our biases, and encouraging open communication within the teams to express perspectives and feelings, respectfully asking for clarifications when there is miscommunication, establishing clear norms for communication, decision-making, and conflict resolution, and ensuring that the norms accommodate cultural preferences. And I think this is very important to have as a team this conversation so that we all come to a shared understanding of what it means, because we bring our own understanding of how decision-making should be, how conflicts should be resolved. So if we have that shared understanding and we establish it, then teams will start functioning better. And sharing this, not just one time, but an ongoing basis with team members so that we develop that shared understanding and this becomes inbuilt into our own teams. When there are conflicts and we cannot resolve it, reach out to mediators or facilitators with cultural understanding and expertise. And scheduled regular check-in to discuss team dynamics, address concerns, and to ensure that cultural differences are actively managed. This can be one of the difficult parts of it. Recently, we had a conversation, how it can take away from class time to have these conversations, how it will stop from doing work we think is actual work. But without having this understanding, without having that shared background where everyone feels they are contributing, where they are working as a team, where they are valued, then all the work that can be done may not result and be productive. And we have to also recognize that different approaches can be equally valid, and we need to encourage a willingness to adapt diverse perspectives. We can use statements when there are missteps, when there are issues. I hear you're frustrated and upset. Can you share more about what specifically has caused this frustration? I hear you're unhappy with how things are going. Could you give me more details so that I can better understand your concerns? Or ask questions like, it sounds like you are dissatisfied with the outcome. what specifically happened that led to this perception. And it can go both ways. The person who's impacted, the person causing an aggression can both ask these questions so that there is a discussion, there is a communication, and we can build shared understanding. Asking open-ended questions. This will help gather more information and also encourage communication. And finally, listening to others' perspectives. Even when we find others' opinions are different from what we think, listening will make them more likely to engage in conversations with us. This will help us learn more about where they are coming from and understanding why they think the way they do. And this can help us find ways to see things differently. So I just wanted to share this example where this intercultural competency and intercultural understanding was built in our own CIBC bank. And what they were finding is that newcomers, they wanted to employ newcomers because they wanted to have a diverse team to attract a diverse group, like their customers. They wanted to reach out to a diverse group of customers. And what they found is they did a lot of placements and internships to break down the barriers to hiring diverse individuals into the bank. But what they found, once they were hired, the individuals were placed in positions lower than what they were qualified for, or they also possess different social toolkits. They came with different social toolkits, which did not make them successful in working together in the teams. And there was attrition. Individuals left the organization. And so what they did was they looked for resources from within the organization. They found that there were already existing cultural groups. There were Asian, East Asian, Hispanic groups, African groups. There were cultural groups within the organization already. And so they reached out to these groups and asked individuals in those groups who had already been born and brought up in Canada, who knew what the social cues were, to mentor the others who were coming in new. And this helped learning some of the unwritten rules, the social cues, and even developing cultural competence. And then it enabled them to retain a diverse employee base and attracting new markets, resulting in growth for the organization. Now, this is a business story, and it may not be applicable directly to our own situation, but it gives a sense of where we can go from here. And in our own University of Regina, if you see the feature story of You Are Linked, we see how mentorship can help individuals who come from outside to go into the labor market, to find employment, to find mentorship, to access opportunities. So this is a positive example of how when we become or develop our intercultural competency, the end result can be productive. So I just want to leave these questions now that we have heard some of the things that we could do. It's a continuum. I just want to read these statements. You don't have to do anything. You can go and think about it and see if you agree or disagree, or what you could do to change if you did not agree with it. Let me read those statements. My team values and celebrates diversity. I am comfortable expressing ideas and opinions at team meetings. Team members have an understanding of how teams work. Effective teamwork is about rules and structure. Beliefs about teamwork and collaboration are universal, and there are no cultural differences. Teamwork involves social elements like shared goals or cooperation. All this will be posted sometime next week. So you will have some of this to go over, think about, and even ask questions. Thank you for participating in the session today. At any time, you can reach out and talk to me. And now I will open the floor for questions. I have to stop my share. Let me just see next one. I am not able to. Michelle, are you able to? I have to stop share. Have I stopped sharing or?
I still think you're sharing.
I'm still sharing, okay. I'm not sure how to get this now. That doesn't seem to be doing anything, maybe. Let me see. Have I stopped sharing now or? It's not showing something. Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Oh,
Oh, there you go.
I had to go to another screen, my third screen. Sorry about that, yeah. Okay. Okay, if there are any questions, you can ask.
There is one in the chat.
Okay. I agree. Thanks for the presentation. I agree it is very important to learn from each other with respect and caring. Could you please talk about lateral discrimination? Sorry, the last part was not part of my question. Okay. Hi, Veronica.
Hi, Sujatha.
Hi. Could you say a little bit more about what you are asking from the question?
I know, actually, I just heard about this term,
Yeah.
lateral discrimination, and I started reading, and I think, oh, well, interesting. I think I experienced and I've seen some of these situations. So I want to know.
Could you share that with me? Because I'm also not very familiar with that terminology. And
Okay.
if you can share your reading, it will be helpful for us to understand too.
So what somebody told me is about when discrimination happens between, like talking about, for instance, BIPOC groups, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. When discrimination happens, people within this group,
Okay.
like when we don't know well about each other and we use stereotypes to relate to each other. So yeah, that could be.
Very true. I mean, I have experienced that now that you have explained a little more of what you were talking about. The lateral discrimination is something in my work with the Regina Open Door Society, where we had individuals from different cultural backgrounds and different cultural groups, and with gender identification, sexual orientation. And we have seen, because there everybody is from a different cultural group, and we have seen this type of discrimination, and that needs to be addressed too, because newcomers need to learn about indigenous communities, about the white settler community. So we need to learn from each other and create shared understanding, because that's how the world is changing. Like recently I was reading, like even countries are taking away their visa requirements and creating what is called digital nomad visas. So our world itself is changing in different ways, where there is movement. The groups are able to go into other spaces and live there and work together. And so we need to build that understanding, and we need to address discrimination between equity-seeking groups or marginalized groups too. I agree with you. If there is anyone else who wants to add to that, definitely please go ahead. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Sorry, I saw your hand.
Okay. Thanks for the presentation. So quick question. You said you're going to share the slides with those who attended
I think what the research group has asked me to give the presentation, they may post it on your source, or I'm sure they will be doing that. So I could, and I'm open with sharing my presentation there, so it can be
Okay.
accessible. I know there's a lot of reading material there, and
Yeah, no,
it
I
would-
would just find it helpful just to reflect on some of the things that you've said.
Sure.
I'm wondering if you have any examples within your own work setting or work environment of like just practical kind of examples of, you know, in your team environment of
Mhm.
discussions that build this team, you know, that in a way that helps people learn about each other, and get the shared understanding. Yeah, so if you have any of your own
Sure.
personal experiences that you would feel comfortable sharing. And
Absolutely.
I don't know if there's like group activities or things like that that can help sort of build the foundation. Personally, one of the things I always find difficult, and this just comes from my background, is, you know, that you shouldn't ask people private questions. And, you know, just so always some sensitivity about, you know, respecting people's privacy. And maybe that comes from my training as a psychologist and my own background. But anyway, so I just find it helpful to know about group
Sure.
activities or your own personal activities that have been helpful. Thank you.
Yes, definitely I can understand asking questions. For example, one of the things that I always give, I mean, I didn't focus this on macro or microaggression specifically because it was about building cultural competency. But one of the things, asking questions becomes difficult, and like even asking someone, where are you from, or asking about their background, because we are always aware that that can cause harm to the individual. But what I would say is, like, questions like where are you from is okay. What we do further with that question, for example, if someone asked me, where are you from? And I say, I'm from Regina. If someone asks me, where are you really from? Then that becomes an aggression. It becomes difficult. And to answer what could make it possible for us to do things, one of the things I know within our university community, and I know in other groups too, is having culture days. Because I think that's a very easy and simple way of bringing individuals together, like having group potluck. And also during that time, a lot of the things that we talk about are allergies, why certain things are not acceptable, and certain foods which certain cultural groups may not be able to participate in, and to make it more welcoming and have the conversation in a way. I mean, there are from my own personal background, like because I also worked in India, where we are a cultural melting pot as such, where we have different religious groups, ethnic groups, communities. We would have days when individuals could dress in their own cultural clothing and come into the spaces and then share what it means. And in Open Door, we did the same thing. We would have cultural days where individuals would wear ethnic clothing and come in and share, or even talk. We would ask students to talk about their cultures within a classroom if there are individuals comfortable sharing. And building that into the teams and system will build help with team building, because not everybody is just comfortable with just going and having a drink outside or meeting together in a different social setting. So being aware that individuals come from different backgrounds, and how could we make whatever we are learning from each other more available and relevant to the group we are working with. So I think exploring, talking, or even asking different people within the group to arrange these activities. So then we would have a variety of events rather than just focusing on one person doing it or somebody from one culture. And even a 5-minute share. Does that seem, I mean, there are more examples. I could also think about some more that.
Yeah, no, any practical, like little things, activities or things like that that can increase sharing, I think would be helpful. And yeah, those are good suggestions, but I welcome any other.
And there are digital
thanks, Peace.
stuff that we can do because we are an online community, like posting photographs or talking about something. If someone has had an experience of going to a different culture, even sharing within the team their experiences, or even going to visit some other place or a country and bringing that knowledge and background, like we share amongst friends when it happens in work situations, that also builds our cultural knowledge and understanding. Because sometimes, because everything is available now, it almost feels like we know everything.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so we lose all the actual nuances, the sensitivity which is needed to actually address situations.
Yeah. I think like I work with everybody online, and it is interesting because you do have less personal, conversation. So then when it is personal, it feels different.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I also feel like I don't want to put, when you start to talk about culture, like some people might feel like we're just talking about them. And yeah, and so not putting people on the spot, like that they're sharing everything about their culture. Yeah. Anyways.
Or just having general conversations and getting groups to interact, groups who do not interact, having breakout rooms. If you're doing online, we have done a lot of those activities where we just do breakout rooms and talk about maybe a list of things that you share or commonalities, not just about culture, but just to bring that interaction and understanding, which we lose out sometimes because we are so focused on getting things done or a task, and just bringing that human element into things.
Yeah. Thanks for your presentation.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank you.
it.
Is there anyone else who wants to talk or ask any questions? Okay. So I think if we do not have any more questions, thank you all for participating, and feel free to write to me if you have any questions, if you think about something that comes to mind, and have a good long